Dying wasn't the peaceful drift into white light the priests always promised. It was cold, absolute, bone-crushing cold. It started in my toes, a heavy, creeping frost that turned my blood into slush, and then it settled in my chest like a concrete block. I was conscious, but I was a prisoner in my own skin. I couldn't blink. I couldn't draw a breath deep enough to fill a thimble. I could only smell the sharp chemical sting of formaldehyde and the metallic tang of dried blood. Then came the sound, a zipper, the screech of metal teeth interlocking, growing louder, closer. It was the loudest thing I had ever heard. "Just get it done, Silas. Just get it done," a voice whispered. I knew that voice. It was trembling, cracked with fear. Light. It flooded my vision, harsh and fluorescent, burning my retinas as the bag was peeled back. I tried to scream, to thrash, to sit up, but my body was lead. I was nothing but a pair of eyes staring up at the acoustic tiles of a ceiling I didn't recognize. A face loomed over me. Dr. Silas Thorne. I had known Silas for 20 years. We played golf on Sundays. He had held my wife's hand as she took her last breath in the oncology ward, promising me he'd done everything he could. Now, he was holding a syringe. His face was pale, the color of old parchment, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the frigid temperature of the room. He raised the needle, aiming for my neck. His hand shook so violently, the liquid inside the barrel foamed. I forced everything I had, every ounce of will remaining in my 65-year-old soul, into my eyes. "Look at me, Silas. Look at me." Our eyes locked. He gasped, a wet, terrified sound, and the syringe slipped from his fingers. It hit the tiled floor with a shatter that echoed like a gunshot. "Oh, God," he whispered, stumbling back until he hit a stainless steel sink. This was the moment my life ended. I wasn't in a hospital bed recovering from a stroke. I wasn't in the recovery room. I was lying on a steel slab in the county morgue, a toe tag scratching against my ankle, marked as a John Doe. "Help," I tried to say. The word was a rasp, a dry clicking in my throat. My tongue felt like sandpaper. Silas collapsed onto a rolling stool, burying his face in his hands. He was weeping, his shoulders shaking. I lay there, the paralysis slowly, agonizingly retreating, feeling the cold seep into my bones. It took me 10 minutes to move my fingers, another 10 to lift my head. "Ah," I croaked. The single word tore my throat raw. Silas looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from guilt, not work. He didn't reach out to help me sit up. He looked afraid to touch me, as if I were a vengeful spirit he had failed to banish. "You didn't die of a heart attack, Arthur," he whispered. The air conditioning hummed, loud and indifferent. "Your family, they didn't want an ambulance." I stared at him, my mind sluggish, trying to piece together the fragments of the previous night. "They paid me," Silas said, the words tumbling out now, vomiting up his confession. $50,000 cash, in a briefcase. Your son, Julian." The revelation hit me harder than the physical cold. It was a physical blow to the center of my chest, stopping the heart that had just barely started beating again. Julian. My mind flashed back. The memory was jagged, distorted, but it was there. Last night, my 70th birthday. The dining room table at Julian's house, the house I had bought for him and Carla when they got married, because Julian said the market was too tough for first-time buyers. I remembered the candlelight reflecting off the crystal. "To your legacy, Dad," Julian had said. He was standing at the head of the table, holding the bottle of wine. It was a 1982 Bordeaux from my private cellar, a bottle I had been saving for his 40th birthday, but he had insisted we open it for mine. I remembered his smile.
It wasn't the warm, easy grin of the boy who used to run to me with scraped knees. It was tight, anxious. His eyes hadn't met mine. They were focused on the glass as he poured. Carla was there too, my daughter-in-law. She was wearing the diamond tennis bracelet I had given her for Christmas, tapping her manicured fingernails against the tablecloth. Tap, 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 like a countdown. "Drink up, Arthur," she had said. I took the glass. I trusted them. Why wouldn't I? I was the patriarch. I was the patriarch. I was the father who had bailed Julian out of 3 failed startups, who had paid off his gambling debts in Vegas without telling his mother, who had loved him with a blindness that I now realized was my fatal flaw. I drank it. The taste came back to me now, sitting on the morgue slab. It had been rich, oaky, but underneath the velvet of the wine there was something metallic, bitter. "The wine," I whispered to Silas. Silas wiped his face with a trembling hand. "Tetrodotoxin, a paralytic cocktail derived from pufferfish. It doesn't kill you immediately, Arthur. It slows the metabolic rate down to almost 0. It mimics death. Your heart rate drops so low a paramedic wouldn't find a pulse unless they knew exactly where to look. It paralyzes the diaphragm." He looked at the shattered syringe on the floor. "That was potassium chloride," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "To stop your heart permanently." "Julian, he threatened me. He knows about my debts, Arthur. The gambling. He said he'd ruin me. He handed me the cash and said he wanted you turned to ash by morning. No autopsy." I swung my legs over the side of the table. They were numb, heavy logs that didn't feel like they belonged to me. The paper gown I was wearing rustled in the silence. I gripped the edge of the steel table, my knuckles white, fighting the dizziness that threatened to pull me back into the dark. "You were going to kill me?" I said. It wasn't a question.
"I couldn't do it," Silas sobbed. "I looked at your face. I remembered when you sat with me after my father died. I waited. I thought maybe the toxin would finish the job, and I wouldn't have to be the one to do it." I looked down at my hands. Liver spots, wrinkles. The hands of a man who had worked 40 years to build an empire of logistics and shipping, solely so his family would never know the hunger I grew up with. I had built a fortress of gold to protect them, and they had pulled the stones down on top of my head. I asked. "They're at your estate," Silas said. "They think you're being processed for cremation at the funeral home across town. I falsified the time of death. 11:42 p.m. I tried to stand. My knees buckled immediately, sending me crashing toward the hard tile. Silas lunged forward, catching me before I hit the ground. He was weak, pathetic, but his hands were warm. The contact made me realize just how cold I truly was. "You can't go there, Arthur," Silas pleaded, struggling to help me onto the stool. "You legally don't exist right now. If you walk out that door and Julian sees you, he's desperate. You don't know what he said to me, the look in his eyes. If he knows the poison failed, he'll use something louder, a gun, a pillow." I sat there, shivering, wrapped in a blanket Silas pulled from a cabinet. He was right. I was weak. I was disoriented. And I was dead. If there is anyone out there listening to this, if you are sitting in a warm room, confident that the people you share your blood with would never hurt you, look closer. Don't make the mistake I did. Don't let your love become a blindfold. I spent 70 years thinking loyalty was currency, that if I gave enough of it, I would get it back. I was wrong. I wish someone had warned me that the hand you hold the tightest is the one most likely to break your fingers. "I need to see," I said. My voice was getting stronger. The anger was burning off the toxin. Silas asked. "My house." I pointed to the tablet sitting on the counter near the sink. He handed me the tablet. His passcode was simple, his birthday. I knew it because I had sent him a card every year. I navigated to the App Store, my fingers clumsy and stiff, and downloaded the interface for the new security system I had installed 2 months ago.
Julian didn't know about it. I hadn't told him because I wanted to surprise him with the added security for the estate, thinking I was protecting his inheritance. Irony is a cruel thing. I logged in. The wheel spun for a second, and then the feed loaded. Camera 1, the living room. The image was crisp, high definition. It showed my sanctuary, the leather armchairs I read in, the fireplace where I roasted chestnuts at Christmas. There were no tears. There was no grieving widow. My wife was gone, God rest her soul, and she was spared this horror. But my son, Julian, was standing by the fireplace.
He was holding a glass of my scotch, the 25-year-old single malt I kept for special occasions. He wasn't wearing black. He was wearing one of my cashmere sweaters. He was laughing. He threw his head back, taking a swig of the scotch, and then he turned to the bookshelf. My first editions, Dickens, Hemingway, books I had collected for decades. He pulled Great Expectations off the shelf and tossed it into a black, heavy-duty garbage bag sitting on the floor. Garbage, he said. The audio feed was slightly tinny, but I heard it. Carla walked into the frame. She was on her phone, pacing. Yes, I know it's Sutton, she was saying into the device, but we want to list it by Monday. We want a cash offer, no contingencies. She paused, listening to the person on the other end. Then she smiled. It was a predatory, hungry smile. No, he didn't suffer, she said, winking at Julian. It was very peaceful. Julian stopped tossing my books. He raised his glass to the portrait of me hanging above the mantel, the one painted when I founded the company. He's gone, Julian said, his voice dripping with a mix of relief and contempt. Finally, the old bastard is gone. Do you know how long I've waited for this? Scraps. I had given him a $500,000 salary. I had bought his house. I had paid for his cars. To the future, Carla said, ending her call and picking up a bottle of wine from the coffee table. To the Maldives, Julian echoed. I watched them. I watched my son, the boy I taught to fish on the banks of the captured river, the boy I held when he cried over a broken toy, celebrating my murder. He wasn't mourning me. He was erasing me. He was liquidating my life before my body was even cold. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it wasn't sadness. It was the last drop of weakness leaving my body. I looked at Silas. He was trembling, terrified of what he had done, terrified of what I would do. You said I don't exist, I said, my voice low and steady. The croak was gone. Silas nodded. Legally, yes. Good, I said. I looked back at the screen. Julian was now taking my favorite watch off the mantel, the Patek Philippe I had earned when I made my first million, and strapping it onto his wrist. Take me to your cabin, Silas, I said. Hide? Silas asked. I looked at the steel slab I had just vacated. It looked cold, lonely. To plan the funeral, I said. They want to bury me on Friday. The grief I had felt moments ago hardened into something cold and sharp, like the scalpel sitting on the tray next to me. I was dead to the world, buried by the greed of my own blood. But as I stared at the dark reflection in the morgue window, I knew one thing for certain. I had never been more awake. There is a specific, suffocating texture to silence when you are watching the people you love destroy you from a distance. For 3 days, I had been living in Dr. Thorne's hunting cabin, a damp, cedar-paneled box hidden deep in the woods, smelling of wet wool and abandonment. I sat in a broken office chair, my body aching from the cold, bathed in the blue glow of 4 computer monitors. I had become a ghost haunting my own life, a spectator to my own erasure. Through the high-speed connection Thorne had rigged up, I was tapped into every camera in my estate. I saw the study where I had signed Julian's college tuition checks. I saw the kitchen where I had made pancakes for my granddaughter. I saw the master bedroom where my wife had spent her final days. And in every room, I watched the vultures pick the carcass of my legacy clean. On the center monitor, the feed from the study flickered. Julian was there. He wasn't wearing black. He was wearing a polo shirt and drinking my scotch straight from the bottle. He was standing in front of the antique mahogany safe, the one I had bought with my very first paycheck 40 years ago. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, inlaid with mother-of-pearl, built to last a century. Julian didn't care about craftsmanship. He held an angle grinder in his hands. "Just open it, you useless thing," he muttered, the audio crackling through my cheap speakers. Sparks flew in a violent shower, scorching the wood I had polished every Sunday for decades. The screech of metal on metal was piercing, even over the digital feed. I watched, gripping the armrests of my chair, as he butchered the cabinet. It took him 10 minutes to cut through the lock mechanism. When the heavy door finally swung open, hanging on a twisted hinge, his face lit up with a greed so naked it made me look away. He shouted, "Carla, get in here." Carla drifted into the frame a moment later. She was holding a tablet, scrolling through something, probably real estate listings. She looked at the open safe, then at the destruction on the floor, and shrugged. "Finally," she said. Julian reached in, pulling out the thick leather binder that held the titles to the house, the cars, and the physical stock certificates I had kept for emergencies. He fanned them out like a poker hand. "Everything," he said, breathless. "The house deed, the titles to both Mercedes, and look at this, bearer bonds. Dad was so old school." He grabbed Carla by the waist, pulling her in for a kiss. It wasn't a kiss of affection, it was a kiss of victory. They were celebrating a heist. "We can list the house on Monday," Carla said, pulling away to look at the papers. "I already talked to the broker." "Forget the end of the month," Julian laughed, tossing the bearer bonds onto my desk. "The Maldives, baby, first class. I'm thinking we stay for a month. I need to decompress." "You deserve it," Carla cooed. Stress. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest, bitter and jagged. He was stressed about murdering his father. Carla asked, looking down. My heart hammered against my ribs. Buster, my 12-year-old golden retriever. He wandered into the frame then, his tail low, his head down. He was pacing, sniffing the air, looking for a scent that wasn't there. He looked confused. He looked heartbroken. He walked up to Julian, nudging his hand with a wet nose, looking for comfort. "Get off me," Julian snapped. He didn't just push the dog away, he kicked him. It wasn't a lethal blow, but it was hard enough to send Buster yelping and skittering across the hardwood floor. "Filthy animal," Julian sneered, wiping his pants. "He sheds everywhere." "Just take him to the shelter tomorrow," Carla said, bored. "Drop him in the night drop. They'll put him down if he's that old." "Done," Julian said. "He smells like Dad anyway." That broke me. Watching them steal my money was one thing. Watching them plan to incinerate my body was another. But watching my son kick the only living creature in that house that actually loved me, that ignited a fire in my belly that burned away the last remnants of my sadness. The grief evaporated, replaced by a cold, diamond-hard resolve. I heard a car pull up outside the cabin, gravel crunching under tires. Dr. Thorne entered a moment later, shaking the rain off his coat. He looked terrible. His eyes were sunken, his skin gray. He was carrying a grocery bag and a laptop bag. "Arthur," he said, his voice jumping. "I see better in the dark, Silas," I said, not turning away from the screens. Silas set the groceries down on the small, warped table. "Yes, I told Julian there was a backlog at the crematorium. I told him the incinerator needed a part replaced. He was furious." "Friday," I repeated. "Friday is the memorial," Silas said, wringing his hands. "They scheduled it for 10 a.m., St. Jude's Chapel. It's a shame, Arthur. They're just doing it to keep up appearances for your business partners. They plan to announce the sale of the logistics company at the wake." "Of course they are," I said. "Come here, Silas." I pointed to the laptop I had been working on. While keeping one eye on the cameras, I had spent the last 6 hours digging into the digital footprint of the company I had built from the ground up. The company I had entrusted to Julian 3 years ago when I decided to semi-retire. Silas asked, leaning over my shoulder.
I accessed the offshore accounts in the legal cloud storage, I said. I wanted to know why. Greed is powerful, Silas, but murder, matricide, that takes desperation. Julian isn't just greedy. I pulled up a spreadsheet. Red numbers filled the screen. He's been embezzling, I said, tracing the lines with my finger. For 2 years. He's been skimming off the shipping contracts, funneling the money into shell companies in the Caymans. But he got sloppy, Silas whispered. $4 million, I said, but that's not the kicker. I opened a message from the IRS dated 2 weeks ago. Subject, notice of audit. He was facing a full federal audit next week, I explained.
If I were alive, I would have been the one to receive the subpoena. I would have found out. Silas stared at the screen, horrified. No, I said. He killed me to bury the audit. My death triggers the key man insurance policy. It pays out $10 million to the company, enough to pay back the taxes, bribe the auditors, and cover his tracks before anyone looks too closely. I hit print. The small inkjet printer in the corner whirred to life, churning out page after page of damning evidence. The embezzlement records. I have everything, I said. Arthur, Silas said, his voice trembling. What are you going to do? You can't just walk into the police station. Not yet, I said. I turned back to the monitors. It was Thursday night now, the night before my memorial. The feed showed the master bedroom, my bedroom. Carla was sitting at my late wife's vanity. She was drinking wine, her face flushed. She was opening the velvet jewelry boxes I had kept untouched since my wife, Elena, passed away 5 years ago. She pulled out a pearl necklace. It was a triple strand of South Sea pearls with a sapphire clasp. I had given it to Elena on our 30th anniversary. It was the most beautiful thing she owned. I had promised it to my granddaughter Sophie for her 18th birthday. Carla held it up to the light, inspecting it like a pawnbroker. Finally, she muttered. She unclasped it and fastened it around her own neck. She looked in the mirror, turning her head from side to side, admiring herself. Then she laughed. It was a cruel, hollow sound. It looks better on me anyway, she said to her reflection. That old witch didn't have the neck for it. My hand shot out and gripped the edge of the desk. The wood creaked under the pressure. I squeezed until my knuckles turned white, until I lost feeling in my fingertips. Elena was a saint. She had welcomed Carla into our family when no one else would. She had treated her like a daughter. That's it, I whispered. I stood up. The chair rolled back, hitting the wall with a thud. Silas, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Silas jumped. The suit? Yes, I picked it up from the dry cleaners like you asked. It's hanging in the closet. But Arthur, I walked to the closet and pulled out the garment bag. I unzipped it, revealing my best black suit, the one I wore to board meetings, to weddings, and to funerals. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, I said. I stripped off the flannel shirt and sweatpants I had been wearing for 3 days. I dressed slowly, methodically. White shirt, starched stiff. Black tie, knotted perfectly. The suit jacket fit like armor. I looked in the dusty mirror of the cabin. The man staring back wasn't the victim who had woken up on a morgue slab. He was a judgment. Silas watched me, wringing his hands. Once you walk through those doors, there is no going back, Arthur. They will know you're alive. He is, I said, adjusting my cufflinks.
He might try something violent right there in the church, Silas warned. Let him try, I said. I looked into the mirror one last time. I thought about the thousands of people out there who might be listening to this story one day. I wondered if they would have the strength to do what I was about to do. It's a strange thing, realizing that your life is about to become a warning label for others. I hoped they were watching from somewhere safe. I hoped they never had to feel the cold of a morgue table to realize who truly loved them. I'm not going back to the way things were, Silas, I told him. looking at the screen where my son was now pouring the rest of my expensive wine down the kitchen sink, laughing as the vintage red swirled down the drain. I'm going forward. They wanted a funeral. I'm going to give them one. I grabbed the thick stack of papers from the printer and shoved them into my leather briefcase. I checked the digital audio recorder in my pocket. Fresh batteries, memory card clear. "Let's go," I said. The drive to town was silent. The rain hammered against the roof of Silas's old sedan. A rhythmic drumming had matched the beating of my heart. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth. Justice, justice, justice. We crested the hill, and the spire of St. Jude's Chapel came into view, piercing the gray morning sky. The parking lot was full. I saw Julian's Mercedes parked right in the front. I pulled out my phone. It had been off for 3 days. I turned it on, ignoring the flood of missed notifications. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Robert," I said when the voice answered. Robert, my personal attorney, sounded like he had seen a ghost. "Arthur, is that? I thought, my God, the memorial is starting in 10 minutes. "Don't go inside yet, Robert," I said, watching the chapel draw closer through the rain-streaked glass. "Wait for you? Arthur, what is happening?" I said, watching Silas pull the car up to the curb, right behind the hearse that was supposedly carrying my ashes. "Arthur, tell me what is going on," Robert demanded. I opened the car door. The cold rain hit my face, sharp and awakening. It felt like baptism. It felt like war. "Don't ask questions, Robert," I said, stepping out onto the wet pavement and smoothing my jacket. "Just call the police."